Mark Barwinski, our opening keynote. Mark has been speaking before. In the meantime, he got a Swiss passport, which really impressed me, the way he got a Swiss passport based on his intriguing background. And when we looked for a keynote, I immediately turned to Mark because he's the perfect one, because he made the transition from a US passport to a Swiss passport with a lot of experience in the US, and he has the experience to explain the mad world to us. Please welcome Mark Barwinski.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Christian. It was 2016 when I first briefed at Swiss Cyberstorm in Lucerne. And since then, I've been back very often on your side of the stage. Like Christian said, one of the things that I really like about this event is about this sense of community. And whether it is Christian's and the team's energy, or whether it is the diverse audience that I see here, but it's truly a fantastic event in Switzerland. And so today, as with many other years prior, I see that diversity in the audience that he spoke about, right? We have CISOs that I know, and we see technical experts, cybersecurity professionals, researchers, even professors who are shaping the next generation of leaders, and some students that will soon be leading organizations, protecting our data, securing our future. And so, in a mad world, resilience naturally may mean very different things to each of us. Right? We come at it with different perspectives, with different backgrounds. In December of 2024, Mark Rutte, when speaking in front of the Carnegie Europe event in Brussels, described our landscape, our current scenario, as being in a state that is not war and not peace either. And many of you, of course, remember the headlines that Christian alluded to, from cyber attacks against critical infrastructure in shipping ports in Germany, to cyber attacks on check-in systems and baggage systems across airports throughout Europe. We have drone sightings outside of these same airports disrupting commercial operations. We have GPS jamming in the Baltics. We have drones and jet fighters crossing over airspace across NATO. And so there is only one way to describe this. Right? And this is where Ursula von der Leyen most recently, just on October 8th, made it very clear. We live today in a state of hybrid warfare. And so, in these uncertain times, it is all the more critically important for us to have the skills and the capabilities in resilience. And so I wanted to do something different today. I wanted to share with you some of those experiences and insights that I have over the last 20 years or so, and how I apply those towards building resilience in you or your teams. Imagine yourself for a moment, you're in a dark room. It has no windows, just like this room. You cannot tell the difference between day and night. You're working in a forward operating base somewhere between Kabul and Herat, near the border with Iran and Afghanistan. It's a little dusty. Your job is to both consume and produce classified intelligence. monitor communications, monitor intelligence collection systems, investigate incidents when adversaries are trying to hack military networks. This was my job for 1 year as an intelligence analyst and as a representative of the National Security Agency in Afghanistan. My job was to be the cybersecurity liaison officer. Now, in those early days, I was new to a war environment. I had not been there before. And so it was a brand new experience for me. 2,500 degrees Celsius. This is a temperature that thermite grenades burn. They burn brightly, they burn intensely. Now, these are not grenades like you may think of grenades, fragmentation grenades, the ones that explode. These are the ones that incinerate, that burn everything in their path. To the left of me near my desk, I had a thermite grenade duct taped to the top of a steel safe used to store classified material. After all, we operated in a bunker that was a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility. Behind me on the top of the server rack, I had a second grenade strapped to the top. And you see, during those early days, I oftentimes wonder if I would be able to pull that trigger. Because my job was to initiate the self-destruct mechanism should the base be overrun by the Taliban. We could see them outside the fence line, you could see them on the ridges, and sometimes you would hear small arms fire outside the perimeter of the base. And so in a moment of need, it would be my job to set this and destroy the equipment. Now, you can imagine this introduces a little stress. Certainly did for me those first couple of days. And since then, I have not come across another environment, either in Zurich, Munich, or anywhere else in the world, where step one in my incident response plan was to set the place on fire. Now, I have to admit, there is something strangely satisfying about the prospect of pulling that trigger and setting that grenade. Maybe it goes back to being a bit of a pyromaniac at one point. But I was not alone. I was part of a two-member team working side by side with Jeff. Jeff was 15 years older than me, closer to retirement, a little bit heavier than me. Die-hard fan of American football. Baltimore Ravens, to be exact, the team outside of NSA headquarters. And so we sat opposite to one another in our desks with a plywood partition wall between us so we couldn't see each other. But we could hear the keyboard. One night early on, for no particular reason at all, I decided to call his attention. Hey, Jeff, have you seen the latest intel report? Taliban activity nearby. Ooh. That caught his attention. I could hear him sitting up. He pops his head around the plywood partition wall, only to be greeted by a light right in the face from my flashlight. I know, not a nice joke. He wasn't happy. Now, I've been trained as an intelligence analyst to read raw data, to connect the dots. The dots were telling me that I was seeing rage and anger in his face. This was followed by about 2 minutes of profanity. It was incredible. He gave me a combination of 4 little words that I could never imagine possible. But after a few seconds, we settled back down. We had a moment of silence before we burst into laughter together. And so something really special came of that, which is over the subsequent weeks and months, we tried to one-up one another and think of ever more creative ways to trick each other and have a joke and have a laugh together. And in the process, get closer together and become a better team. There was the old classic, coming around the corner from the coffee machine, be greeted with a flashlight in your face. Or the other old favorite, knock, knock, who's there, open the door, flashlight in your face. You never knew what to expect or where it would come from. In industry, as in war, we experience stress, and we need to find ways to release that stress and release that steam. And so, what grew organically without even thinking about was the ability to have these micro resets, these moments of levity, this ability to inject humor and remind us that we were human, to make us stronger and continue to be resilient. But in industry too, I have come across plenty of thermite and plenty of flashlights. There are those individuals who raise the temperature in the room and who are ready to set off at the moment's notice, burn everything and everyone. And there are those individuals who bring the light, the humor, the lighthearted ability to reset, and who make those teams stronger. Which are you today? And which are you in your work? Now, let's take a step back for a moment. I am a civilian, never a soldier. I'm married, 3 young children at the time. How did I find myself in Afghanistan for a year? You see, I wanted to make a difference. I believe in the mission. I believe strongly in the purpose. And I wanted to have impact and contribute with my skills to what I believe was important then. And so I volunteered. Now, I didn't know much in terms of what to expect in Afghanistan, but one thing that I at least knew then was that I really should ask for permission from my family and from my wife. And so I asked her if she would be supportive of this and if she would want me to do this. And she said, yes, of course, as long as you don't do anything stupid. Now, this seemed like a really easy request. I mean, come on, right? I'm not going to fly like a superhero with a cape and look for trouble. I am a cybersecurity professional, for God's sakes. Why would I be doing stupid things? "48 hours later, I found myself standing in the tarmac, the runway of an airbase in Qatar. Meet my right, a C-17 military cargo plane, Globemaster 3, 4 powerful turbines. And I was in line to board this plane on my flight to Kabul, to a war zone. And so you single file, you go in, and this is not a an airline. There are no seats in the center. That's reserved for cargo. And so I sit in jump seats along the wall. Once I got comfortable with my gear, helmet, rifle, pistol, backpack, I realized that there is something in the center of the cargo hold. It's a black pillow, rubber-like, looks like a bladder. So I elbowed the soldier next to me. Clearly, he's got more experience in this department. And I asked him, what's with this? What is this? He very calmly said, it's 5,000 gallons of jet fuel. We're on a refueling mission to Kabul. Here I am, strapped to a giant bomb flying into a war zone. Right? So soon the plane is in the air, and then the crew starts to brief us and says, we're going to cross into Afghani airspace. We're going to go full dark conditions, blackout conditions, and we will take evasive maneuvers on approach. Now you have to understand, this is all starting to get a little uncomfortable now. As we're getting ready to cross the border, the crew gives us some more indications, right? In the event of a crash, these are the things you should consider doing. Honestly, none of them seem realistic to me at the time when you're strapped with 5,000 gallons of jet fuel. But here I go, committed. And so suddenly the lights go out, complete and total darkness. This plane has no windows from our perspective. Clearly, the pilot. And suddenly the plane banks hard to the right. It takes a dive for what seemed to be forever, and then banks hard to the left again. And all I can do is just sit there and feel the G-forces. I can hear the engines, the 4 turbines roaring outside the wall. What I realized then is that in the midst of all of this chaos, and I was nervous, I found a sense of calm and peace. And looking back on it, it is about trust. You mentioned trust earlier. It is about the ability to trust the training and the skills of the pilots. You see, each one of us had jobs. As commanders of the aircraft, their job was to take us to Kabul safely and land us without incident. For me, as a passenger, taking a ride, it was to stay quiet and out of the way and not be a distraction. And so trust is fundamental to what we do in resilience. In industry, we will find ourselves in fast-moving situations with incomplete information and no windows to look out. We operate in chaos. Right? And so finding the clarity of thought, the calm to navigate through these turbulent times is absolutely critical. I have also seen in corporate those leaders who take the controls of the pilots and want to fly the plane themselves. We must realize that our job is to trust our teams. Each one of us has a job to do. Trust their training, trust their background. And so it is said that the highest form of human motivation is trust. It brings the very best in us. And I experienced this firsthand then. My colleagues and myself trusted those pilots with our lives, absolute and total trust. And it felt different than a normal airline turbulence flight. Now, remember we left Jeff complaining back in that bunker in Afghanistan. He was beginning to tell me that I had made a mistake in my timesheet, that I needed to fix this, that there was something wrong. Turns out there was no mistake. My job, it was 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. 105 hours for a week was the average. And in a moment of need, in a moment of crisis, we would surge to 108 hours in 1 week. Now, one night, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and monitoring communications, I intercept what appears to be a sensitive itinerary. This itinerary said that 2 very senior US generals were coming to Kabul very shortly for an official visit. The itinerary had been disclosed in unprotected channels. It stated the arrival time, the route to be taken with turn-by-turn directions through the streets of Kabul. If the Taliban had intercepted this, I did not know. But surely if they had that information, they would spring into, or they would prepare for an ambush attack. These are the moments in which we spring into action. Right? Reaching back to the Pentagon, communicating with the traveling party, we worked through the night to ensure that we changed itineraries in time. And then we continued to monitor the communications to ensure that no updated itineraries had been leaked again, that it remained safe. OPSEC. These are the moments that also communicate the value of your work and how you feel about what you're doing. It is about the sense of purpose. It is about the transparency that what you have done had an effect, and I could see that from the conversations and the interactions with the Pentagon and with the changing of the itinerary. But in industry, in Zurich, I have seen more people and more teams stressed over 42 hours of work than I ever came close to working 108 hours. And so the difference between Zurich and Kabul is purpose. There is a fundamental disconnect between what we do and the impact that we can see that it's having. And we need to focus on that transparency with our teams and with our people. It is said that purpose-driven individuals, purpose-driven teams perform better over time, and that they are more resilient to the stress of their environment. Early this year, there was a survey from Deloitte that concluded that approximately 90% of Gen Zs and millennials feel that a sense of purpose is very strongly correlated to their job satisfaction and to their well-being. You see, I don't think that it's limited to Gen Z and millennials. I think that we all have an innate desire to matter and to have impact. We just need to ensure that as leaders, we facilitate and enable that transparency for our teams. And so, when we talk about resilience, we can think of this in different ways. We think sometimes of it as computer scientists or in working with standards as people, process, and technology. All right, we put everything in buckets. It is true that if you have very well-documented standard operating procedures, SOPs, then you will be in a better place. You can have exercises, tabletop exercises, drills, practice until it's perfect. You see, these are examples of process resilience. How do you prepare? And what are the processes and the documentation and the plans that you have in place? On the other hand, we can look at redundancy plans, load balancing, redundant servers, thinking of your cloud resilience in terms of alternative vendors you may be working with. These may be examples of technology resilience. But you will find that people resilience is the hardest of them all. If you have perfect plans, but your people are exhausted, you will fail. If your people are strong, but you fail to consider the various scenarios and capture and document this in your processes and your technology, you will fail. And so you cannot look at this individually as individual pillars. You must absolutely look at resilience holistically. It is about that total package. And so, now, 15 years later, those lessons and those experiences that I had in Afghanistan, I carry with me to this day. And I apply those in my interactions. I learn about thermite and flashlights, right? Those individuals who raise the temperature in the room, those insignificant, simple little tools as a flashlight that can serve a purpose in bringing humor and levity to the team. I learned about trust, the foundational building block, and how important it is to resilience. About letting pilots be pilots. I learned about clarity in chaos. Being calm, being in the zone, being hyper-focused, blocking everything else out. And I experienced something that was described to me before going to a war zone, which is the brotherhood, the common purpose. As soldiers will describe it, the we got each other's back mentality. And so when we look at this, we need to think differently, and we need to design resilience into our processes. Now, before I move on from resilience, because we don't live in a time of peace, but in a time of hybrid warfare, we have to think of resilience differently as a way to optimize for resilience. You see, it's not about optimizing processes, about lean, about maximum utilization. These are terms that we use in peacetime. This is not a time of peace. These are uncertain times. And so search capacity, strategic resilience, our ability to dial up the effort has to be there. But if we're running hot all the time, we won't be able to achieve that. World-class athletes sometimes gain weight ahead of a cold water swim. Or if you're a sumo wrestler, you gain weight to improve your stability. I think organizations need to think in this same way. What are the redundancies that we need to build in? And so we began speaking about a flashlight, a way to introduce humor and be reminded that we're human. In the end, resilience is about light. It is about seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Each of us has a light. Executives, CISOs, legislators, researchers, cybersecurity experts, professors, and students. Our task is to find the best place to shine that light. So shine that light on your teams, on your culture, and on yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Be the one to do the first question today. We have microphones coming around. You don't have to scream. While they're still thinking about a question, here is one. I mean, you've been on a mission, high hours mission in Afghanistan, and then you returned to your civil life, and you work for a large Swiss bank, where you say purpose is a challenge. How can you build up the same or a similar and a minimal sense of purpose when just doing business? So a shareholder earns more money. How do you do this?
Yeah. I can count on the easy questions. So there is purpose in terms of, say, societal value, you may think, and however or whatever preconceived notions you may have about a particular industry. And there is purpose that we as leaders in engaging with and driving teams should convey, and the transparency and the environment that we should create for that. So when I was running the cyber operations for UBS Bank and the SOC and advanced analytics teams, we can discuss and we can communicate and we can really make transparent the value of our people. We need to be able to receive the message. We need to be able to communicate what is done with their work, with their effort.
So the purpose becomes the people.
The purpose becomes the people and what they do in terms of protecting the bank in this case or an organization, and how you try to really bridge that or really provide that transparency end to end so that people don't think they're just pushing pencils.
Yeah. Shit jobs. Good. Now it's time for your question. You're all afraid. So you have to see Mark during the break.
I'll be around.
Thank you very much, Mark. Here's a bit of Swiss chocolate.